Hey everyone, welcome back to the Speed Seekers podcast, or welcome if this is the first time you've listened to this podcast. I don't know where you've been, but glad you're here. Hey, today's guest is my good friend, Brian Ghidinelli. And if you don't know Brian, which I'm sure you probably do, you probably either raced against him, SCCA races at Thunderhill, Spec Miata, had your butt kicked by Brian in a Spec Miata or something in the past. But you probably also know Brian through motorsportreg.com, which is Brian's baby. So, Brian, hey, welcome back to the show. The last time you were on the show, I actually looked it up. It was episode 43, and this is episode 190. The last time we did this, we were at Indianapolis Motor Speedway at the SCCA Runoffs in 2017, I think it was. And I got to think that some things have changed since that time. Welcome.
A few things. It's great. It's great to be back with you, Ross. We were actually sitting in a rental car, kind of just next to the tunnel, behind the paddock, or behind the pit lane rather.
And what I remember was it was actually getting to be warm in the rental car, but every time we opened the doors or the windows, it was starting to be loud. And it was one of those kind of podcast days.
Yeah. A sweaty podcast.
Yeah. Oh, people are not going to want to listen to that now because they're going to go, oh man, they were sweating. Anyways, yeah. SCCA Runoffs back at Indy this year, right?
That's true. Yeah. So a lot has changed since 2017, at least in my life.
Yeah. What's changed?
So for people who are familiar with motorsportreg.com, it's a small website where you can find track days and club races and autocross and things like that. Actually 7,000 events per year. We were acquired by Hagerty, which is an automotive lifestyle company that people are probably familiar with. They do tons of great things. They insure classic cars. They have a great media program, lots and lots of different products and services for people who are gearheads and enthusiasts. And so our team joined forces with them in 2019. And so for the last 2 years now, I've been leading the development of MotorsportReg, and then our other products and services, which include Race Hero, which is a live timing app for race events, and something we launched not too long ago called Speed Waiver, which lets you sign the waiver at the gate electronically so you can speed up event day, which has been really important this last year with the pandemic to have touchless ways to conduct events.
So, and one of the things I mean, obviously you mentioned Hagerty, and I think most people know who Hagerty is, or maybe had an idea who Hagerty was, but in the past couple of years, they've sort of been everywhere. And one of the things that I think is very cool is just the whole media stuff. I always thought of Hagerty as, okay, that's insurance for classic cars. But the media side of Hagerty now it just has amazing content.
It's a massive operation. So, I mean, there's a recency bias for me. Like my whole life is Hagerty now, so I see Hagerty everywhere. But Hagerty has been what was once a very small marine, like wood boat marine insurance program back in the 80s. It is now a 1,500 person company with offices all around the United States, as well as international operations too. And the content, I think, really speaks to the fact that it's an enthusiast company, because you see what Larry Webster, who might have been on the podcast before. I don't know. Have you had Larry on?
Not yet.
Okay. He'd be a good guy. So yes. Former editor and writer from Car and Driver and Road and Track. He leads our media operation, and it's not just articles. We do have the Hagerty Drivers Club magazine is, I think, the world's third largest automotive magazine by circulation. Wow. Goes to something like 700,000 people, I think, or 650,000 people a month. But in addition to that, all of the online content is really incredible. So we have a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers, and we do these incredible videos called Redline Rebuilds. If you haven't seen this before, what they do is they find an old car, and there's a guy named Davin who's on our team. They've got a garage in Michigan that they do all this work in. They find old cars, all different kinds, trucks, cars, everything under the sun, and they tear them down and they rebuild them, and they turn them into stop lapse videos of the breakdown and the rebuild process. And so you can basically see an entire motor get rebuilt in about the span of 5 or 6 minutes in stop lapse photography style. And I watched one just the other day. This video, I think it has like 13 million views on it, but it's like a 50s era Chevy pickup, and the engine in it is called a I keep saying stovepipe, and I know stovepipe is the wrong word, but it's stove something, stove bolt. It's stove bolt.
Yeah.
So if you search for YouTube for Hagerty stove bolt redline rebuild, you will have 10 minutes of your mind being blown of this engine being rebuilt, but also just the photography and the way that they put it together. And I think that's what's kind of cool about Larry and the media operation is it's not just the content, but also the craft. I mean, really, in the same ways you'd look at a great race car driver and say that person's almost an artist with a car. A lot of what they're doing around this automotive enthusiast content is art as much as it is content. And there's just really lots of fun stuff that you can spend lots and lots of time. So, don't do it while you're at work. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But lots of great stuff if you go to the Hagerty.com website and look at the content.
Hey, going back to Motorsport Reg, you said 7,000 events. How many is that? What's happened over the past year? I'm kind of curious, the pandemic and the impact that that's had on the events. I mean, it seemed like everything stopped for a little while, but then it seemed like everything got even busier towards the end of the year. Can you kind of give us a snapshot of that?
Yeah, it is counterintuitive. All of our lives were obviously changed dramatically last year. And so the world at large thinks that there were no events going on. But once we got out of that initial lockdown phase of sort of March, April, May, from sort of June onwards, we had pretty significant year-over-year growth compared to 2019 in terms of registration and participation. So one of the things you can't do, unfortunately, is you can't manufacture new weekends. So when you look at a racetrack somewhere, there's only so many weekends and they're already rented out. So the number of events didn't necessarily increase too much between, say, June 1st and the end of the year, but participation did. So events that might have had, 80% capacity or 90% capacity, we had lots of wait lists again last year because driving at a track day or an autocross was something that we could do safely. And most jurisdictions were allowing those kinds of outdoor events to happen, even where I am in California. So, the world hears that we are in the events business or something, and they're like, oh, that must be really bad. Well, it was pretty bad for a couple of months, but after that, the sport was pretty active. And we're seeing the same thing now. Right now, things are kind of gangbusters. A lot of activity, a lot of events are being set up. And I think everyone's very optimistic. I just got my first vaccine shot this week. I think the world at large is feeling really optimistic. So right now we're seeing a lot of just positive momentum around the hobby and the sport because there is some pent up demand still from not being able to get out and do the kinds of things we normally would have done over the past year.
Well, I think, and it kind of ties into the whole thing of, I know Hagerty's whole thing is, get out and drive and all that kind of stuff. And I think that whole message, I guess, at Sebring for the 12-hour race, before the race, sitting there talking to a fellow coach, and we're kind of commenting on the number of entries and the fact that entries were up for a Daytona 24-hour race and Sebring 12-hour race and for IMSA races. And it's almost like racing is stronger now than it was 2 years ago. And I wonder how much of that is just people are like, you know what? I'm not going to live my life in fear. I'm going to get out there and do the things that I wanted to do. And I know more people who have sort of been, I guess, on the fringes of events, whether, they've done one or two events and now they're totally jumped in, both feet and head first and everywhere. And they're just more active. So I wonder if that's a sign of things to come for the next few years.
I hope so. I mean, you and I obviously love this sport and this hobby, so I hope so. And I'll say, even on my side, like personally, I've been really heads down professionally the last couple of years post acquisition and getting this team off and running in the right direction as being part of Hagerty. And I myself went out and bought a race car over the holiday break, the New Year's break. So I've got a race car. I'm back on track again, and it feels fantastic. I mean, I have to say, like, I love going to the track, but there is something about just getting back to something where you have 100% focus, and that focus cannot take into account anything that's going on in the real world. It's just what's in front of you. It's just the next few corners. It's just the cars around you. It's just the goal for the session. I think in a time when life can be stressful and there's a lot of uncertainty, that is a powerful drug to have that kind of focus and flow state.
Well, that's, if you don't mind, I would love to talk to you now, mostly about sort of your comeback, the you've been away from racing for a few years. You raced SCCA Spec Miata, which doesn't come much more competitive than that. But I'm curious what it was like getting back in the car after not having done a whole lot. I think you did Thunder Hill 25 in there somewhere, but you didn't do a lot of racing in the past few years, and now you're jumped back in. And what it's been like to get back? What has it taken to get back there? How rusty were you?
Definitely rusty. Rusty in different ways, actually. So 2014, you and I worked together. I ran the runoffs at Laguna Seca in Spec Miata. And since then, I kind of had a off and on racing opportunities. I was doing some endurance racing here and there, but I'd sold my Miata and I wasn't doing anything consistent. So when an opportunity arose for the 25 hour of Thunder Hill, or maybe a Lucky Dog or a Champ Car race or a WL race, things like that, I go and do some endurance racing, which I love endurance racing. I love the team aspect of it. So it's great, but it wasn't consistent. And so over the break, I bought a Spec E46, which is a sort of early 2000s era BMW 3 Series, prepared to a common set of rules. And the reason why I bought that car is because it can run almost anywhere. It's eligible for SCCA in the T3 class, the Touring 3 class. It can run with NASA. It can run with most of the endurance racing series. And so if you want to get track time, you can get lots of track time. So my goal in getting the car was, one, just to get back out there and start doing something more consistently. And two, to have fun. And so you mentioned the runoffs going back to Indy. When we were at Indy, I had actually never been to Indianapolis before going to the runoffs and working at the runoffs. I was there to work, not to drive. And I don't know that the track itself is all that special, the circuit for the road course, but the experience of being there was pretty amazing. I got the chance to go up in the starter stand for the Spec Miata start, actually, and watch that.
Oh, that's cool.
Got to walk around the track a little bit, be there for a week as part of the runoffs. And so when I heard that it was going to go back to Indianapolis this year, I decided that I wanted to be part of that, just for the experience of going there and actually driving across the bricks and being part of the show. There was almost 1,000 competitors at the 2017 runoffs. And I don't know if that's a world record or not, but it's got to be one of the largest amateur competitor road races anywhere in the world, for sure.
Yeah.
So to be part of that this year, I couldn't say no. So that's kind of what got me back into it. My goal for the year was to have fun and ease myself back into it. But I realized that I'm not very good at just having fun with racing, is what it boils down to. So you said about being rusty. Yes, I found myself rusty. So
I guess, how quickly did the competitive nature kick in, and it's like, screw the fun, I just want to win?
Yeah, it's like the first qualified session, I was on pole and I was like, oh, this is kind of addictive. It's a downhill slide from here. I mean, really the first weekend. So my program for the year is to run the SCCA majors, which is what qualifies you to go to the runoffs. And so the first race of the year was at Cal Speedway in Fontana, and did one shakedown day with the car at Thunder Hill beforehand, just to make sure that it was put together. It had kind of sat for a year or so prior. So we want to make sure that when we went all the way to LA, it was going to be in good shape. And one thing that I think I've always been pretty good at is being able to get into a car and drive it reasonably quick. I don't have a deep engineering background from a car perspective. If you ask me how to make the car better, that's something that I'm still working on learning. But what I can do is try to make the car go pretty much as quickly as it will go given the current configuration. And so pretty straight away, we were quick. And at Cal Speedway, actually had pole both days, won both days, and then reset the track record by about a second. So that's a pretty good weekend. I mean,
so that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
Fire again, right?
Mic drop. Let's just leave, right? I mean, that's the thing. When you have a tiny bit of success, and I think this is actually going to lead into what we'll kind of talk about here, but a little bit of success, one, it gets the juices flowing. So yeah, now suddenly I'm thinking about not just going to the runoffs, but how can I be competitive this year in the runoffs, given the time and budget and everything else that I have available. But two, I think a little bit of success, one of the things that's great about T3 is it's a mixed class group, or it runs in a mixed class group. So T3 is on track at the same time as other cars, T2 cars, T4 cars, GT cars, et cetera. And so it's very much like endurance racing in the fact that there's lots of different cars with different capabilities. And so when you're racing Spec Miata, what's great about Spec Miata is that every corner you must get 100%, or 4 cars will pass you. There's no slack in the system for not getting 100%. And I think in a mixed class group, it's really easy actually to overlook when you're not getting quite 100% of the car. And I think that was that's the thing that I came to take away this last weekend at Thunder Hill by having someone else look at some of my data and my video. I was just being a little bit lazy and overlooking that laziness because you're leading the race and you won. All right. But the goal here is not just to have a good result. In fact, that's the thing that I keep in mind that you always say, right? If you focus on the performance, the results will come. And so if you focus on the results, I think you overlook your performance.
But you did take pole, you did win. I guess what pushes you? Is it just yourself? Is it just your nature then? I mean, because it'd be really easy to go, well, that's it. I mean, I guess as racers, we're always looking for more, but some look for more, if that makes any sense. And is that just your nature, or is that something that you work at?
I'd say as an individual, I'm a pretty driven person. So whether that's racing or it's my fitness or it's my business, I'm competitive. Going back to when I was a little kid, we would play miniature golf, like probably lots of people do. And my brother would cheat. He was 4 years younger than I was. So I'm probably 9. He's probably 5, something like that. And he cheats. And I remember very distinctly, being like, you can't do that. That's cheating. That's not how we do this. Competitive way back in the day in that kind of way. And that really, I think that is still true for me today. So when you ask, is it about just being driven to find more? I mean, yes, I think from you and I working together in 2014, when I come off track, the question I remind myself of is you saying if the car could do just one thing better, what would that be? And the corollary is kind of there is always more. There is no perfection. There's always more.
Well, and I was going to ask you when you were talking about, you said that you don't have great engineering skills and that kind of knowledge, but you're good at driving the car at the limit. Does that, because ultimately that's part of the driver's role, right? Is find the car's weakness, expose its weakness. Do you do that? Can you do that? Is that something that comes easily for you or not so easily?
Not easily. It's something that I'm learning. And in fact, one of the reasons to switch from Spec Miata to this BMW is that it has some more adjustability. And one of the parts of my program this year is to spend some more time at test days working on screwing with the car, changing the shocks, changing the sway bars, changing the tire pressures, really working on mixing things up to learn what those swings do and how it translates into the driving experience. For the endurance racing I've done, you get into a car and first of all, you have 4 different people who are 4 different sizes. So half the time I can barely reach the pedals because I'm a fairly short guy. You get in there and you're just driving as fast as you can and taking care of the car at the same time, but you're just trying to get the most you can out of the car because it's a compromise. It's a compromise between you and the other drivers. It's a compromise between sprint race pace and keeping the car under you for 25 hours, maybe in that case. So I think that, I just kind of say hey, here's what I got. Let's go see what we can get, kind of work up to it and see what the car will give us. So the part that I'm working on then is the debrief and understanding what changes would do to make the car better. I didn't grow up go-karting or racing or anything like that. I came to this later in life, I'm sure most of the listeners here. So for me, I have to back into those learnings. And we have tried in the past to do some of those things on race weekends or even on the test day before race weekend, but it's just not the right environment. You have to be really focused and intentional about that. And that's what we're going to do this year is go to some test days. We're going to bring some brand new tires so that we know what we have. And we're going to spend the time and the money to actually learn something as opposed to just drive around in circles.
Yeah. That's interesting that you say you're going to use new tires, because how many people go testing on just going testing. So use the old tires and they find out what works with the old tires and they put new tires on and they don't go a whole lot faster. I'm
guilty of that. This last weekend at Thunder Hill, we were, I wasn't able to make the test day because of some work obligations. So on a majors weekend, you have 1 practice session and then 2 qualifying sessions and then 2 races. So we ran a practice session on a 3rd heat cycle Hoosier, and the car didn't feel great. And, the 3rd heat cycle is still a pretty good heat cycle. That's not an old tire. But before we started making changes, we said, let's first try running one of these 2 qualifying sessions because we're going to put on some sticker tires for this. Let's try running one of these qualifying sessions first and see like, is it me? Is it the driver? Or is it the car? Or is it the tire? And it turned out to be a little bit of all of those things, right? It was a little bit driver, a little bit of the tire. And so we didn't really need to make too many more changes over the course of the weekend because we didn't optimize for the older tire.
Mm-hmm. As you were saying that, what went through my mind was, so you've been back, and how many races have you done now this year?
Three race weekends. So 6 races.
Kind of going back to the whole thing around being rusty. I got to think that the first race, you're knocking a lot of the rust off. Are you finding that the more time, or the shorter the gap between driving, the easier it's becoming? Or has it been sort of the same each time? Like when you went to Thunder Hill, did it take you a lap and you're up to speed, or did it take you a little while to get back into it?
So interestingly, there's 2 or 3 categories of rust that I would describe.
Yeah.
One is around the fundamentals. And so when I go to Thunder Hill, I don't know how many laps I have there, but I have a lot of laps. I mean, I've run the 25-hour, I think 9 or 10 times. So it must be thousands at this point.
Yeah.
I know where the track goes, right? I mean, I can drive it with my eyes closed. And yet what I found this last weekend, especially not having the test day beforehand, is that my vision wasn't as eyes up as it should be. I was trying to go fast. I was trying to hustle because I didn't have a lot of track time to prep. And so what I found is that my hands were a little busy. I was kind of double steering the car sometimes on turn-in. My eyes weren't looking as far ahead as they should. And I needed to really focus on some of those just real fundamentals like brake release, brake application, the turn-in to make sure I'm doing a smooth, consistent turn-in, not like kind of jerking on the wheel. When I was at Cal Speedway, which was the first race of the year and the first time in the car, I hadn't been to Cal Speedway since 2014. So I'd done some sim racing there in lead up to be prepped for that. But what I found was because I didn't have as much seat time there, I didn't know the track as well. I actually did the fundamentals there a lot better. But what wasn't as good at Cal Speedway is some of my like racecraft, for example, and getting 100% of the car. But I actually had some of those fundamentals like vision and so forth. Like those were better because I didn't know the track as well. And so I was more focused on like learning the track again. Whereas at Thunder Hill, I think I took that for granted. So if I had some categories, what I'd say is one is getting 100% out of the car, like every corner. At Thunder Hill, I had someone else take a look at my data and my video. And we noticed in turn 4 and turn 6, which are both left-handers, it wasn't that the car wasn't going out and using all of the track, but it was like, it was a little too easy. Like there was a little bit more. I could get on the gas just a little bit easier, a little bit earlier, and really make the car use all the track. And I think that's for track day drivers, non-racers in particular, really easy to see yourself using the whole track. And that is not the same thing as actually using the whole track. And so like kind of the way that we were talking about this weekend was, if I'm exiting the corner, the tires need to be hanging halfway off the berm, over the dirt every time, because that's like just enough grip to stay on the pavement and not fully go 2 wheels off. Like that's actually using all the track. That's where you have to be there. And it's really easy to be like, well, I left a foot at the exit, or yeah, the car went out over the berm, but was it really using it? And so having someone else look at that data and video was kind of keeping me honest.
So, and to me, there's 2 different ways that you can use all the track at the exit. There's I know I'm supposed to unwind the steering wheel and drive out there. And I see a lot of drivers doing that. And then there's I'm going to stand on the throttle so early that I have to use all the track out there. And I think those are 2 very different things. And, you can drive at 9.5 tenths, use all the track, but you haven't really driven the car off the corner with the throttle. You've driven it off with the steering wheel. And I think it's, 10 tenths is you're on the throttle and the throttle is driving the car off to the edge of the track. Does that make sense? The difference?
100%. And I think it's really easy. Like here's where the rust comes in. It's really easy to deceive yourself which ones you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So go back to me trying to go fast. Like I'm trying to go fast. Well, I'm not really analyzing quite so much as like, could I pick the throttle up just a hair earlier? It's more like, well, I'm leading. I seem to be going pretty quickly right now. So like things are going pretty well. If I was focused more on the performance, I would have been saying like, okay, did I really use all the berm that time? Like, could I've gotten on it just a little bit earlier? And then each lap sort of progressively doing that, getting on it a little bit earlier, a little bit earlier, a little bit earlier.
So how do you know? How do you know? Because it's different for every driver. Like, how do you know?
It's a good question. I mean, so I'm an analytical person. Like I'm a software developer now, but I have a mechanical engineering degree. So I'm a technical right brain type person. Data and video review are really important for me, which doesn't help you when you're in the car, but it's part of the overall learning process for me of a weekend. And so the second area where I've been really rusty is on my debriefs and my data and video review. I've got a new laptop with a new aim setup. It's a new car. And so none of my saved views work any longer. And I find myself staring at the squiggly lines a bit and not always extracting as much insights out of it as I was able to a few years ago when I was really doing this all the time, right? So there's an area where I need to spend some time away from the track to improve on, because I'll be able to extract more detail out at the track. But I think in the car, not that I'm suggesting everyone go out and drop wheels, but really until you find that you cannot stay on the track any longer, there's a little bit of overdriving that is necessary, I think, to know whether or not you found the limit. Now, I personally tend to be a person who works up to the limits in increments. I don't tend to go out and overdrive the car and then back down. That's just has never been my driving style, really. I tend to work up a little bit to the edge. But until you exceed the limits, you don't really know. And so, like I said, for me, it's kind of thinking about the two things. One is, what is the feel of the car when I'm at the limit? So what do the tires feel like? What is the slip angle and the sort of slightly perceptible drift of the car when you're really driving the car at the limit on the tires? And then two, are you using that throughout the corner in a way that requires you to use 100% of the asphalt? Now, the only caveat to that I'll say is, like, you can still use all the asphalt and like had a bad turn in or be turning in the wrong place and like still not be going as fast as possible. Right. So there's obviously lots of nuance to dig into there. But I think there was a point this last weekend, where I really felt the car moving in a way where it was a consistent 4-wheel slip angle in a few of the corners. And like, you get the feeling. And when you're out of the car for a while, it's easy to not recognize you're missing that feeling. And as soon as you get it, I recognize that, okay, now I could tell from corner to corner when I was getting it and when I wasn't getting it. So that became a new signal, if you will, to look for.
And you were talking about overdriving. So I'm going to go and do the One Lap of America event, and I can't wait. It's going to be really one of those things I've never done. I can't wait to go and do this. And I think the first time I'm going to drive the car is actually in an autocross course. And I haven't done a lot of autocrossing, but the little bit that I've done, my approach has been, if I've got 3 runs, the first run, a little on the cautious side, just kind of figure out where the course, I've walked it, I've visualized it, I've prepared that way. But the first one, I want to make a reasonably clean run so I've got something that I can work with. The second run, I'm going to get messy. I'm going to overdrive it. And I'm going to, it's not going to be pretty. And then the third run is, okay, now tidy that up. And that's kind of almost the way you're talking about it, is sometimes you've got to overdrive just a little bit and then bring it back. And the key is being able to overdrive a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't make mistakes, right? If you're consistently underdriving, you're probably not going to make mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, you have nothing to learn from. So I think that's exactly right. I think autocross is a great example and a great training ground. It kind of goes to like qualifying. When we do qualifying runs, for me personally, I do 3 laps and that's it. Like after that, first of all, the tires are probably going to go off a little bit, but if you can't get it done in 3 laps, I don't generally think you can get it done in 8 or 9. And autocross is kind of the same way, which is you have a very limited number of laps. So you have to make those laps really count. And I think that is a attention to detail that all drivers would benefit from, which is treat every lap like this is your qualifying lap, not in the sense of you're necessarily trying to go 100% flat out, because a track day might not be the right environment for that. But what I mean is treat it like it's your qualifying lap in the sense of like, you want to make this lap be perfect. It won't ever be perfect, but make it like it's going to be perfect. Really pay attention to every turn in, every brake release, every turn in, every apex, every exit. When I sit with a student in a track day, I usually ask the question like, how do we go as fast as possible down the straight? The answer is, well, we need to have a good exit. All right, true. What do we need to have a good exit? Well, we probably need to have a good apex. Okay, yep, right. What do we need to have a good apex? Well, we probably need to turn in right. Okay, yeah, like all these things, you just keep backing up, right? And so I think that's the attention to detail. That's what I was being sloppy on at Thunder Hill, is I was leaving some corners where it seemed like it was going okay. But was I really getting 100%? No, because I was being a little bit sloppy there. I wasn't paying attention to those details.
And I got to say, Thunder Hill is such a large track. Meaning, I mean, it's long, it's got a lot of corners, but it's busy track, and it's easy to, out of, let's say 15 corners, it's easy to not be at 100% for one or two of them. And to be fast, to be truly fast, you got to be, as you said, 100% in all of them, not just 13 out of 15.
When I've done data reviews, doing coaching for folks in the past, they can be a second a lap slower than I am, right? And so what they're hoping is that I'm going to show them this secret trick in one corner that they find the second. But the sad reality is that it's 1/10 of a second in 10 corners. And I personally, I love that. Like, that's what I loved about Spec Miata, is that if you were off by 1 or 2 corners, you were 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 spots back on the grid. You really had to be 100% in every corner. And I think that mentality applies. I guess that's what I'm saying about the qualifying lap mentality. Not that you're necessarily trying to go and get 10/10 out of the car, but you should be trying to have the attention of detail necessary to extract the maximum for the pace you want to go on all the corners. If you want to drive a 9/10 pace because that's where you're comfortable in a track day with your daily driver, it makes total sense. Yeah. But that shouldn't be an excuse to be sloppy, for example, or to not use all the track, or to not turn in, or not use the right brake release.
Well, and I would say, I mean, my goal, if I'm going to run at 9/10 or 8/10 or whatever that kind of conscious decision is, I want to drive my car home at the end of the day, so I'm not going to drive at 10/10, then the goal should be to drive at 9/10 or 8/10 or whatever that is in every single part of the track. Not 13 out of 15 corners I drove at 9/10, and in 2 corners I drove at 7/10. So it's the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Or 10/10 on the straightaways and 5/10 in the corners.
Yeah. Hey, so you touched on some time on a simulator earlier on. From a knocking the rust off perspective, how much did that help? And obviously you said a little while ago that you got to a point where you could feel the car kind of all 4 tires at the same slip angle. That's something that's difficult to feel on a simulator. So what did you use the simulator for, and how did you do that?
A place where I've struggled the most with the sim is definitely butt feel, relating it back to the car. I think that's true for most people. My personal setup is I have an Oculus, so it's a VR setup. So I get that sort of immersive reality. But I'd say what I have mostly used the sim for over the years is learning tracks and reinforcing visual markers and just markers in general, right? What I have done a few times, so I actually, for the first time this last year, I did an actual iRacing league with the Porsche Club. They have this great PCA Club Racing sim racing league that myself and some other Hagerty folks went in and did. And that was the first time that I'd done an actual race. And I remember the first time about to take the green flag, I had the high heart rate, just like I would get on the grid in a real race. After I got my first race out of the way, like that heart rate went down for subsequent sim races. It's still elevated. I still get a little bit sweaty palms when you're in a good dogfight. But I'd say what I've mostly used the sim for is for relearning visual cues and visual markers and getting consistent with things. I've also used it for doing like qualifying lap runs. So I'm going to leave the pits and run just those 3 laps and try to get 100% out of the car and then come back in and stop. But I find like going to Cal Speedway, for example, haven't been there in 7 years. I'm now going to be driving a very different car. So my Spec Miata video that I have is useful, but the markers are all going to be different. There's going to be a car in iRacing that actually is going to be much closer in terms of speeds and so forth and gearing. And so I used it for that to kind of get a leg up on on my test day, basically, just to ramp up the test day so that I would be out of the box faster than I would be otherwise. But I'd use it mostly for like visual markers and references, and just like talking about double steering the wheel a little bit at Thunder Hill. It's something that's very easy on the sim to say, okay, these laps, I'm just going to focus on my hands. I'm just going to focus on looking through the corner. I know these are things that you talk about doing when you're at the real track too, which I think are great. But the sim is obviously a very cost-effective way to do those things in bulk. And what's beautiful about it, what I love about it, is you can do it for 30 minutes a day, 7 days in a row. And that, you and I have talked to Dr. Walker about sleep in the past. And there's all this science about how you need to actually sleep and have some of your deep sleep and REM sleep time to learn what you've experienced over the course of the day. And so spreading out that time over multiple days, I think is actually really, really valuable.
Yeah. So you're getting up at 3 a.m, hopping on the sim for 30 minutes, going back to sleep. No, not recommended. Hey, with the sim, have you taken your phone or a video camera and just mounted it, sort of looking over your shoulder at your hands and your feet movement? Because
I've not, no.
Give that a try sometime, because I've recommended that to drivers, and sometimes they come back and go, "Whoa, I didn't realize, what I'm doing with the steering wheel." And they start to recognize things, and you talked about the braking and brake release. I got to think that the sim probably helped with that as well, just sort of getting the right feel or the right timing of the brake release and that kind of stuff. But if it's why sitting in the right seat with somebody, you can kind of look over and you can keep an eye on their hand movement on the steering wheel and their feet and things like that. Same kind of thing with the sim. So give it a try sometime. It'd be interesting to see what you think.
I just wrote that down. That'll be my next session.
Okay. This afternoon. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's up next for you?
Well, racing wise, we've qualified for the runoffs at this point by doing 3 races. So do some of that testing over the summer, like to do the focused learning, the actual time spent to learn something new. For work-related stuff, MotorsportReg is, we're seeing incredible demand right now, which is really exciting. We're working on some fun things. I guess I'll put a plug in that we are hiring. So if there are people out there that work in software and would like to come work in motorsports and software together, I can share my contact info, but we would love to talk to people who are either software developers or engineering managers or people that work on the technical side of building software products. The last couple of years has been really heavy on the work side. So sort of just personally, I'm focused on riding my bike a little bit more, spending some time with my family. I've got a 5-year-old who likes to come into the racetrack with me. So spend some time with her. And I know that I will not be able to go to Indianapolis this year and not want to be competitive. But I'm going to spend a lot of time focusing also on being mindful and grateful and focusing on having a good time. Focus on the performance, and then we'll see where the results come.
Well, maybe I'll have to come and hang out with you at Indy. So that blew me away whenever that was 3.5 years ago now. But like you said, 1,000 entries or whatever it was, just the number of cars and people there and just what that event was like. That was so cool. So, hopefully get back there. So to kind of wrap up today, Brian, I always like to ask, what's your one piece of, what your speed secrets, your one piece of advice for listeners today?
Well, I think my takeaway from coming back to racing this year is it's really easy for us to see in our own performance what we want to see, or what we're conditioned to see, or what our biases allow us to see. And so, having someone take a look at some of my video and my data unlocked those couple of corners for me at Thunder Hill, because they just pointed out what was actually pretty obvious. I wasn't getting 100% out of the car in those corners. And so I'd say no matter how much time you spend on tracking, and another set of eyes to look at your data or your video will do one of two things. Either you will learn something new, which is highly likely, or something to try, or it will confirm that what you're doing is on the right track. And that can be just as valuable as learning something new. So I'd say find another set of eyes to give a look. Even if you think that person's not as fast as you, there's a good chance that they might see something that you're just not aware of.
Of course, you have to have an open mind to that.
Well, that is true.
And I think pretty much everybody that has ever driven a car in a racetrack knows that they know it all. I mean, they know how to drive. I'm sorry, being a little sarcastic there. No, great advice. And I think that's I like the way you put it though, is we see what we want to see. And, wow, you could take this a lot more globally as well, right? We hear what we want to hear too, right? In many different ways. So I think that's pretty cool advice.
There's at Hagerty, our CEO, McKeel Hagerty, is a real big proponent of the growth mindset. And I know that you are as well. Carol Dweck's book, The Growth Mindset and so forth. And I think I've always been curious. That's one of my sort of core values is curiosity. But pairing that with the growth mindset is just being a little bit more intentional about being open to other perspectives and viewpoints, because there's almost guaranteed something to learn there. And when you think of it that way, that open-mindedness, I mean, it just unlocks so many opportunities for personal development and personal growth.
And it takes a little bit of ego management to be able to ask somebody, can you give me feedback? And that ego management may not be a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like going back to business or sports or fitness or something else, like I want to perform at my absolute best. I know that I'm not there. Like I know that I'll never be there because it's a sort of a horizon line that I'm working towards. And so if I can steal, beg, or borrow from somebody else to get me closer, like let me have it. Let me have it.
Yeah. Well, Brian, it'll be fun to watch this year what you do. I mean, you're already, off to a great start, having been away from it for a little while. But if people want to connect with you, whether they want to apply for a job or just want to watch you kick butt in the runoffs this year, or sign up for one of the 7,000 events, give us some links. Tell us where people can get a hold of you.
Well, work-related stuff, motorsportreg.com. That's where you can find events of all persuasions and disciplines all across the country. So if you want to do fun things with your car, take a look there. We have an email newsletter that you can sign up for that will send you a list of events that are near you once a month. So you'll never have a shortage of fun things to do with your car. I would also recommend taking a look at the Hagerty site and the media stuff. There's just so much great content on there that's fun to take a look at. For me personally, you can find me at Ghidinelli on Twitter. It's my last name, so Ghidinelli. If you want to apply for a job or you want to talk about work-related stuff, you can email me at brian@motorsportreg.com. That should be pretty easy to remember. Yeah. Always enjoy connecting with people on Facebook or LinkedIn or other places too. But love connecting with the sport. That's really what got me into this business in the first place. Why it became a business for me. And so I love connecting with other enthusiasts.
Well, and I'll put all those links in the show notes as well. So if you're listening and you want to connect with Brian, please do. So, hey, Brian, thanks for being on the show again. Let's not wait 3.5 years to do this again.
Yeah, maybe we can do a sweaty recap in Indianapolis this year.
Yes. You pick the rental car. And I'll be there.
It'll be one with a quiet air conditioning system.
There you go. Okay. Hey, keep learning, having fun, and we'll see you at the track.
Thanks, Ross.
Do you want to really understand your favorite track or get a preview of a new track for your first visit? Well, then you need a track map, and Ross has one, and it's free. A good track map is one of the most effective ways to improve your driving. It helps you learn the subtleties of the circuit, as well as helping you keep tabs on how well you're doing at that particular track. Sure, you can Google any track in the world to find a general map of the layout, but if you want an accurate map, one specifically designed to allow you to make notes on it, then you need to go to speedsecrets.com/trackmaps. You can download a map of your favorite track. There are currently 100 of them for the United States, Canada, Europe, the UK, and Australia. And remember, they're all free. Just go to speedsecrets.com/trackmaps. Download your map and get ready for more learning and more fun.